Last week I gave you the players that I'm buying in Dynasty. This week it's a tougher video. It's the players that I'm selling in Dynasty. I'm going to look into the future and try to figure out which players are going to be less valuable come NFL kickoff time into the season. So without further ado, here we go. And this is not going to be popular, probably, but Saquon Barkley. And I get it. Last year was a career year. He could be one of those running backs that transcends all historical data and puts together back-to-back career seasons. But we were saying that about CMC last year. Over the last 3 years, Barkley has rushed the ball 887 times, including 345 times last year. Overall, Barkley touched the ball 378 times last season, and that's a lot. And I'm going to give you a brief history of the RB1s in fantasy points per game over the last 5 seasons, and I'm going to show you how they finished the next season. So we're going to start with 2023 Christian McCaffrey, touched the ball 339 times, 24.5 fantasy points per game in 2023. The following year, we all know what happened. We were duped by Kyle Shanahan, lied to, betrayed. 2024 season, 12 fantasy points per game. He played in 4 games. He did not follow through on what was really, in a lot of leagues, the 101 was Christian McCaffrey. Now, I will say Christian McCaffrey did finish as the RB2 in fantasy points per game in 2022, so his 2022 and 2023, you could say, well, he was the guy, if we can point to anybody, who defied the odds. But let's go further on down the list. In 2022, Austin Eckler touched the ball 311 times, 21.9 fantasy points per game in 2022. In 2023, 13.2 fantasy points per game, played in 14 games, and his efficiency tanked. In 2021, Jonathan Taylor touched the ball 372 times, 21.9 fantasy points per game, RB1 in fantasy points per game season. The next year, 2022, 13.3 fantasy points per game, played in just 11 games. In 2020, Alvin Kamara touched the ball 270 times. Now, he did play in 15 games, so he was on pace to touch the ball more than 300 times in that season. 25.2 fantasy points per game in 2020. The next season, 18.1 fantasy points per game, played in 13 games. Alvin Kamara had a good season the following year. And 2019, Christian McCaffrey, again, touched the ball 403 times, 29.5 fantasy points per game. It's hard to believe. The next year, 30.1 fantasy points per game in 2020, but played in just 3 games. History would tell us no matter how good the situation would appear, no matter how much volume we think that they're going to get, it's going to be extremely tough for Barkley to duplicate his previous season or even to finish as a top 5 running back given the volume that he had last year. And history would tell us that that amount of workload has consequences. And I'm not willing to bet that Saquon Barkley is the one guy outside of Christian McCaffrey maybe that transcends this historical trend. No matter how good the player is, no matter how good the situation is, I'm going to be selling Saquon Barkley. And also, Saquon Barkley is the RB4 according to Keep Trade Cut, player 22 overall. That's really high. And he's 28 years old, so he's past the age apex. I'm also going to highlight his teammate here. A.J. Brown, wide receiver 14, player 35, according to Keep Trade Cut. First off, I will say with these suggestions, we have to be able to balance winning now versus cashing out at the right time. So there may be some teams where you might want to keep A.J. Brown because he's going to produce this year. I acknowledge that. I also acknowledge that this one and Saquon Barkley, it could blow up in my face, but I think we have some good data to back up the fact that I believe A.J. Brown is worth selling in Dynasty. A.J. Brown is getting up there in age. He's past the age apex. He's going to be turning 28 years old this year. The Eagles passed the ball the least amount of any team in the NFL last season, 25.7 pass attempts per game. And I don't really see that changing much considering they won the Super Bowl with the formula of running the ball, tush push, Jalen Hurts, etc. He dealt with a knee injury last year, A.J. Brown did, and missed 4 games. Brown finished as the wide receiver 12 in fantasy points per game, but his expected fantasy points per game ranked him number 20 amongst wide receivers, so he outproduced expectations. And one stat that I came across that didn't make sense when discussing A.J. Brown, his air yards. He ranked number 24 amongst wide receivers in air yards with 1,168 and cashed in 1,079 actual receiving yards. number 14 amongst wide receivers, which I'm sure contributes to that expected fantasy points per game. That's a high that's high. That's a high amount of receiving yards to have with just 1,168 air yards, and that doesn't seem sustainable. And his performance over the last few years would indicate that. And I will say that the target share is going to be there again for A.J. Brown, because the target competition is Devonta Smith, Jahan Dotson, Saquon Barkley out of the backfield, and Dallas Goedert. And A.J. Brown is a beast. So, as I mentioned at the top, this one could blow up in my face, but I'm willing to bet that a team that doesn't pass the ball much, lowest in the NFL, and a player that outperformed expectations given his volume last season, who dealt with a knee injury on top of everything else, is likely not going to live up to expectations in 2025. Now seems like a good time to cash out to me, but let me know what you think in the comments. This next one is therapy for me, so you're going to have to bear with me. And I'm honestly very interested in what you have to say and what the popular opinion is amongst Dynasty gamers. Caleb Williams, he's quarterback 10, player 21 overall, according to Keep Trade Cut. And I have to admit, when you're doing this the way I am, having a podcast and a YouTube channel, you have to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest with the audience. And I've mostly been wrong about Caleb Williams. I've changed course on this, and to be very clear, this is a risk avoidance play. Williams is being valued as a player who has top 6 to 8 upside at the position, and I want to invest in players that I believe will increase their dynasty value. There just isn't much room for Caleb Williams to increase his value where he's currently valued at quarterback 10, player 21 overall, according to Keep Trade Cut. To be honest, I would feel much better if we're in a dynasty startup and CJ Stroud is available, who's ranked very similarly according to Keep Trade Cut. If Justin Herbert is available, there's no way that I'm taking Caleb Williams over those players, because those quarterbacks have proven that they can put forth top 10 seasons. And in the case of Justin Herbert, I believe he put up a quarterback 2 overall season. Williams, I will admit, was not put in a great situation last year. The coaching was god awful. I'm a Bears fan. I know. I was watching every game. He finishes the quarterback 16 overall, the quarterback 21 in fantasy points per game. And I will admit, Williams has an embarrassment of riches in terms of weapons this year, and the Bears only stockpiled more weapons for him in the NFL draft with Luther Burden and Colston Loveland as their first 2 picks. And the Bears also upgraded their offensive line, 3 new starters on the interior, and most importantly, they upgraded their coach. But here's the problem. We don't actually know if Caleb Williams is a good NFL quarterback, and we don't know if Ben Johnson is going to be a good NFL head coach. Trust me, as a Bears fan, I'm really pulling for this situation to work. I want it to, but I have Matt Nagy PTSD. I'm going to need to see this work before I buy into the Caleb Williams hype. And shout out to Jacob Gibbs on Twitter, which if you're not following him, if you're watching this, you're probably already following Jacob Gibbs, but at JA_Gibbs_23 on Twitter. Caleb Williams delivered a 38% catchable ball rate on throws of 20 plus air yards without pressure in 2024. That's 32 out of 33 qualifiers, and his source for that is Fantasy Points data. All of it leads me to believe there are just better options, safer options to invest in, because the price is really high, and to be honest, I don't know if Caleb Williams' price can get much higher than that. And to me, this is simple. There are safer assets that I can acquire in exchange for Caleb Williams in Dynasty, but let me know your thoughts in the comments. The next player we're going to talk about is Kyren Williams. He's the RB12, player 57, according to Keep Trade Cut. And it's true. We want exposure to a Sean McVay running back, but Kyren Williams scares me this season. Last year, Williams led all running backs with an 88.4% snap share. Williams touched the ball 350 times last year, finishes the RB7 overall, RB10 in terms of fantasy points per game. And while it's true that it is likely that Kyren Williams is going to open up as the Rams' primary running back, the Rams did add another running back to their room in the NFL draft in Jarquez Hunter, and while he was a day 3 pick, it adds to the chances that the Rams look to split up the opportunities in this offense, or at the very least, McVay may be more willing to go in another direction if he sees another running back with more juice. And this is because Williams wasn't efficient last year. He ranked number 37 in true yards per carry, number 47 in yards per touch, number 52 in yards created per touch, and number 32 in breakaway runs per player profiler. And according to Sleeper on Twitter, Kyren Williams had 316 rushing attempts last season. He only ran for 15 plus yards 6 times. That's 1.9%. And he also had the second most fumbles amongst running backs, and that's all per fantasy points data. He also doesn't catch passes. Williams ranked number 31 in targets amongst running backs last season. So if you're playing in those PPR leagues, Williams is not as valuable as you think. So he's very dependent on the volume in the rushing game, which is not efficient volume for us in fantasy. And as we mentioned, it's not like Williams was killing it with efficiency in the running game. So we also have a workload issue. See the argument that I made for trading away Saquon Barkley at the top with a running back. Whenever a running back gets over 350 touches, it's concerning. For all those reasons and more, Kyren Williams for me is one of the more clear sells in Dynasty. And this next one, maybe I'm crazy. And again, I always appreciate your comments on this stuff. I love conversations surrounding players we should trade and players we should trade for in Dynasty. But Chris Olave, he's the wide receiver 26, player 79 overall, according to Keep Trade Cut. And like I said, maybe I'm crazy because it appears as though most people posting to Twitter these days are buying this player, but I'm not. I'm selling. With Derek Carr's sudden retirement, I'm surprised that Chris Olave's stock hasn't fallen further, to tell you the truth. And the truth is, the Saints now have the worst quarterback room in the NFL. Tyler Shuck, Spencer Rattler, and Jake Haener likely figured to battle for the starting job. Yikes. Last season, even with Carr, it wasn't as if Olave was killing it. He played in 8 games, commanded 44 targets. That's just 5.5 targets per game. That was good for a 19% target share, number 50 amongst wide receivers, and he finished with fewer than 5 fantasy points 4 times, half the time, 4 times in those 8 games. Olave was also being outproduced by fellow wide receiver and teammate Rashid Shaheed before Shaheed went down with an injury. Olave also missed 9 games with a concussion last season. Olave has never really lived up to the hype after 3 seasons. His best finish was in 2023 when he finished as the wide receiver 19 in fantasy points per game on 138 targets. And to be honest, I just don't know how Olave is going to succeed in 2025. I suppose there's a version of the timeline of reality where Tyler Shuck is good, but I'm not betting on it. If someone wants to give me Jalen Waddle for Chris Olave or Luther Burden or Ricky Pearsall plus, all of those players are ranked below Chris Olave right now, according to Keep Trade Cut. I'm doing it because, to be honest, I don't really want much to do with the Saints in general this season and going forward, so long as their quarterback situation is going to be what it is. Jerry Jeudy, similarly to Chris Olave, Jerry Jeudy is not in a good situation entering the 2025 NFL season. The quarterback situation, while not as bad as the Saints, is not great. Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, and then they drafted 2 quarterbacks in the 2025 NFL draft in Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders. And while it's true, Jeudy had his best season as a pro, it really wasn't a significantly better season than what he's produced before from a fantasy perspective. Sure, Jeudy finished number 7 amongst wide receivers in targets, 144, number 4 in snap share, 94.4%, and number 1 amongst wide receivers in routes run, but this led to just a 22.8% target share, which ranked number 36 amongst wide receivers. In fact, Jeudy didn't really click with the offense until the back half of the season, and that just so happens to be when Jameis Winston started multiple games for the Browns. Winston is now playing with the New York Giants, and overall, Jeudy averaged 21.1 fantasy points per game with Winston under center. With any other quarterback, Jeudy averaged just 9.3 fantasy points per game. Now, there are some positives. Jeudy did rank number 1 amongst wide receivers in total route wins, number 14 in route win rate versus man coverage, but he was just number 64 amongst wide receivers in target separation. And I'm not sure the Cleveland quarterbacks are going to be good enough to get Jeudy the ball on a consistent enough basis this season. So if I can get an Isaiah Pacheco or a Michael Pittman plus, which both of those players are ranked below Jerry Jeudy, I'm taking it. And if I can get a quarterback like Justin Fields or Sam Darnold, which both of those players are ranked very similarly in a Superflex league, I'm doing it. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to